and faster, like
big
get
time.
in life faster. Yeah.
Yeah, it just means that when you work in the business as, you know, when you start as young as we did, you have to grow up really quickly. You know, you got to learn how to set boundaries for yourself and learn how to be an adult, really. And one of the reasons why I struggled so much at school, I think, is because I was in a professional environment, I was treated like an adult, I was working like an adult, and then I went back to school and felt like I didn't fit in because, you know, all of my peers were kind of behaving like their age. And there's nothing wrong with that, you know? And I was this little grown-up, like, oh, I'm just going to do as I'm told because that's what the teacher's saying. So, yeah, it definitely shapes who you are, for sure.
No project manager, no.
Yeah, I mean, it's so much easier said than done to kind of block out the haters, you know? I think that it's something that, you know, even today is something that I know that we work on and our peers work on, and, you know, we've been dealing with things like that for a long time.
I think I've gotten lucky because I get to do it with people that I really care about, and I've also just been, you know, blessed with really special characters and crews that I really love. I think a huge part of our job and what, you know, brings me my own social life is like having great crews, and you end up kind of building these little families in every kind of crew you work on. Specifically like Euphoria, like they've seen me since I was a kid going through, they've seen me in all the ways, you know what I mean? I don't know if I've necessarily figured anything out or if I have a clear answer or anything, but I just really love what I do and I love my job. And so, you know, the actual creative part of making it doesn't always feel like a job. You know, some days you're like, okay, we're ready to clock out, you know? But most of the time,
success is often portrayed as the finish line. Millions dream about becoming famous, about seeing their face on movie posters, walking red carpets, hearing thousands of fans scream their name. From the outside, it looks like the perfect life. But what if success arrives before you've even had the chance to become yourself? What if, while everyone else is learning how to be a teenager, you're expected to act like an adult? That is the story hiding beneath the careers of Tom Holland and Zendaya. Most people know them as Spider-Man and MJ. But behind the Marvel blockbusters, behind the interviews, premieres, and global fame, are two people whose childhoods unfolded in front of the entire world. And the more I thought about their journey, the more I realized something. Their story isn't really about superheroes. It's about growing up too fast. When people talk about Tom Holland or Zendaya, they usually focus on the obvious. The box office records, the awards, the billion-dollar franchise, their chemistry on screen, their relationship. But success has a strange way of hiding its own cost. Because while millions of teenagers spent weekends hanging out with friends, worrying about exams, or making embarrassing memories that would eventually fade away, Tom and Zendaya were already working in professional environments, movie sets, studios, international press tours, meetings with producers, schedules planned months in advance. Imagine being 13 or 14 years old and being surrounded by adults every single day. Eventually, something changes. You stop thinking like everyone your age. You mature faster. You learn responsibility before you've even had time to experience freedom. That sounds impressive until you realize it also creates distance. Growing up isn't only about getting older. It's about making mistakes, being awkward, feeling embarrassed, learning through failure. Most of us are lucky enough to do those things in private. Nobody remembers the embarrassing conversation we had when we were 15. Nobody records our worst haircut forever. Nobody writes headlines about our teenage years. But child actors don't get that luxury. Every awkward phase, every insecure moment, every mistake can become permanent. And that's a pressure very few people can truly understand. What fascinates me most is that neither Tom nor Zendaya presents themselves as victims. They don't complain. Instead, they acknowledge something much more complicated. Every opportunity they received came with another opportunity they never had. A normal school life, anonymous teenage years, simple moments most people never even think about. That's the strange paradox of fame. Sometimes the greatest privilege quietly replaces experiences you never realize you'll miss until they're already gone. One of the biggest lessons from their journey is something we rarely discuss. Success doesn't automatically make life easier. It simply changes the problems. As children, most of us worry about fitting into school. As global celebrities, the pressure becomes fitting into an entire world that constantly watches you. Every interview, every photograph, every social media post, every public appearance. Someone always has an opinion, and eventually, that noise becomes impossible to completely silence. Many people assume celebrities eventually become immune to criticism, but that isn't how human beings work. Confidence isn't the absence of doubt. It's learning how to continue despite it. And that's a completely different skill. Tom's story perfectly illustrates this. Before Hollywood knew his name, before Spider-Man, he was simply a kid who loved performing. But passion often attracts misunderstanding, especially when you're young. Children can be incredibly supportive. They can also be incredibly cruel. Anyone who has ever been teased for following a dream knows exactly how isolating that feels. Whether it's dancing, painting, music, acting, or simply refusing to fit inside everyone else's expectations. Following your passion almost always requires standing alone before anyone stands beside you. That's something almost every successful artist has experienced. Not because success guarantees acceptance, but because originality almost always looks strange in the beginning. And that's where I think the interview reveals its most important message. Neither Tom nor Zendaya talks about defeating criticism. Instead, they talk about finding your people, your community, the friends who allow you to become yourself instead of someone you're pretending to be. Think about that for a second. In a world obsessed with standing out, the real goal isn't attention, it's belonging. Because confidence rarely grows in isolation. It grows when you're surrounded by people who remind you that you don't have to perform every second of your life. Ironically, two of the world's most recognizable actors are reminding us that even they need exactly the same thing everyone else does. Real connection. Maybe that's why Spider-Man continues to resonate across generations. On the surface, he's a superhero, but underneath the mask, he's just a young person trying to balance impossible expectations. School, family, responsibility, friendships, love, identity. Sound familiar? That's because Spider-Man has never really been about superpowers. He's about pressure. He's about wondering whether you're enough. He's about trying to protect everyone else while quietly struggling yourself. In many ways, that's exactly what modern life feels like. Not because we're fighting supervillains, but because we're constantly trying to meet expectations that never seem to end. The older Tom and Zendaya become, the more that line between fiction and reality begins to blur. For years, audiences watched Peter Parker and MJ grow together. At the same time, the actors themselves were also growing up, learning, changing, making mistakes, finding themselves. Somewhere along the way, Spider-Man stopped feeling like another movie. It became a chapter of their lives, a place that watched them become adults. And maybe that's why audiences feel so emotionally connected to these characters. Because we've grown alongside them too. We've watched the journey unfold in real time, not just on screen, but in life itself. There's another reason this story feels different. Despite enormous success, neither Tom nor Zendaya talks as if they've figured everything out. They still question themselves. They still admit uncertainty. They still acknowledge difficult days. That honesty matters. Because social media often convinces us successful people have solved life. They haven't. They've simply learned different ways to navigate it. And perhaps that's the most comforting realization of all. No amount of fame removes the need for support. No amount of achievement eliminates self-doubt. No career is big enough to replace genuine human connection. So maybe the real lesson isn't about becoming famous. Maybe it's about becoming grounded before success has the chance to change you. Because if the world's biggest stars still rely on friendship, still need boundaries, still search for balance, then perhaps those aren't signs of weakness. Maybe they're the very things that make lasting success possible. And in the next chapter of this story, We'll discover that even after conquering Hollywood, there were still moments both Tom Holland and Zendaya quietly wished they could experience. The kind of moments fame could never buy back. There's a quote that says, "You can have almost anything in life, but you can't have everything." For Tom Holland and Zendaya, that sentence feels surprisingly accurate. Because while millions of people dream about living the life they have, there are moments from ordinary life that they never truly got to experience. And those are the moments that can never be recreated. One thing I've always found fascinating about fame is how it changes your definition of success. When you're unknown, success means finally being seen. But once the entire world knows your name, success starts to mean something completely different. Privacy,
Peace. Time.
normality, things money can't simply buy. Listening to Tom and Zendaya, I didn't hear two celebrities talking about blockbuster movies. I heard two people who genuinely appreciate what they've achieved, while also recognizing what it quietly costs them. That balance is rare. One of the most revealing moments wasn't about Spider-Man at all. It was about growing up. Imagine never really having the chance to be anonymous. Never knowing what it feels like to make mistakes without cameras. Never getting to enjoy certain teenage milestones because work always came first. For most of us, those memories become stories we laugh about years later. For child actors, some of those chapters never get written. And what's remarkable is that they don't express bitterness. Instead, they seem to have accepted that every path requires giving something up. That doesn't make the sacrifice disappear. It simply means they've chosen gratitude over regret. And maybe that's one of the biggest reasons they've remained grounded while so many young stars lose themselves. But here's something else I noticed. Despite spending years inside one of the biggest franchises in history, neither Tom nor Zendaya sounds trapped by it. Instead, they speak about Spider-Man almost like people remembering an important stage of life. Not just another job. Not just another movie. A place. A family. A chapter that shaped who they became. That says something powerful about creative work. Sometimes the projects we invest ourselves in stop becoming projects. They become part of our identity. Because after spending years with the same people, watching each other grow, celebrating successes, supporting each other through difficult days, you build something bigger than a film. You build trust. And trust is one of the rarest things in any industry. That sense of family also explains why audiences feel so emotionally connected to them. People often think chemistry can be manufactured. It can't. Real connection reveals itself in tiny moments. The unfinished sentences. The shared jokes. The comfortable silence. The ability to understand what someone means before they've finished speaking. Those aren't acting techniques. They're signs of genuine familiarity. Whether you're watching them promote a movie or simply answer questions together, there is an ease that can't be scripted. And I think audiences instinctively recognize authenticity when they see it. Another theme kept appearing throughout the conversation. Boundaries. It's not exactly a glamorous topic. You don't see headlines celebrating someone for saying no. But learning when to say no might be one of the most valuable skills anyone can develop. Especially in industries where everyone wants something from you.
Your time.
Your attention. Your energy. Your image. Your privacy. Without boundaries, success slowly becomes exhaustion. And exhaustion eventually becomes burnout. What's interesting is that both Tom and Zendaya describe boundaries differently. One seems naturally comfortable drawing clear lines. The other admits it's something they're still learning. That honesty matters. Because setting boundaries isn't about becoming distant. It's about protecting the parts of yourself that allowed you to succeed in the first place. Without those boundaries, eventually there's nothing left to give. Perhaps that's why both of them continue to talk about community. Not fans. Not awards.
People.
Friends. Family. The crew members they've worked with for years. The people who knew them before the headlines. It's a reminder that no matter how extraordinary your career becomes, human beings still need ordinary relationships. Someone who reminds you who you are when the world keeps telling you who you should be. And maybe that's the quiet secret behind their longevity. They never allowed success to replace connection. Another thing I couldn't stop thinking about. Neither of them talks about filmmaking as work. They talk about it with curiosity, like students who still can't believe they get to sit in the classroom. Some people count the minutes until they can leave work. They seem to count the minutes until they can get back on set. That's a completely different relationship with success. Because passion isn't measured by awards. It's measured by what you choose to do even when nobody expects you to. Watching scenes being filmed, learning from directors, observing other actors, asking questions, staying curious. That's how careers last decades. Not because talent never fades, but because curiosity never stops growing. And maybe that's the biggest lesson hidden inside this entire conversation. Success isn't what kept Tom Holland and Zendaya moving forward. Curiosity did.
Humility did.
The willingness to keep learning did. In a culture obsessed with appearing confident, they're comfortable admitting they don't have everything figured out. Ironically, that makes them seem even wiser. Because real maturity isn't pretending to know every answer. It's remaining open enough to keep asking better questions. There's another reason I think their story resonates with so many people. For years, we've watched superheroes save fictional cities. But in real life, the battles look completely different. Protecting your mental health, finding people you trust, learning to say no, accepting that bad days happen for no obvious reason, holding on to kindness in industries built on competition. Those aren't superhero powers. They're life skills. And perhaps they're even more difficult to master. By the end of the interview, I realized something unexpected. The conversation wasn't really about Marvel, or celebrity, or even acting.
It was about identity.
How do you stay yourself while the entire world keeps projecting expectations onto you? How do you continue growing when millions of people think they already know who you are? How do you protect the person behind the public image? There isn't a perfect answer. And maybe that's exactly the point. They're still figuring it out, just like the rest of us. The only difference, the world happens to be watching. Perhaps that's why Spider-Man continues to matter after all these years. Not because he swings between skyscrapers. Not because he defeats impossible villains. But because underneath the mask, he's still trying to become the person he's meant to be. And maybe we all are. Whether we're students, parents, artists, business owners, or simply people trying to navigate life one day at a time. We all carry expectations. We all struggle with self-doubt. We all search for people who make us feel understood. In that sense, the most relatable thing about Spider-Man isn't the suit. It's the humanity underneath it. So when this chapter of Tom Holland and Zendaya's journey eventually comes to an end, people probably won't remember every premiere, or every interview, or every headline. They'll remember something much simpler. Two young actors who entered Hollywood before they were fully grown, yet somehow managed to grow without losing themselves. In an industry where fame often changes people, that may be their greatest achievement. Not becoming global stars, but remaining genuinely human. And maybe that's the real reason audiences continue to root for them. Not because they're perfect, but because, beneath all the success, they remind us that growing up is something none of us ever completely finished doing. Because, sometimes, the greatest superpower isn't saving the world. It's holding on to yourself while the world tries to change you. Fade to black.